Hi, I'm Tom Chapman, and where I'm standing used to be an amusement park called Rose Island. Originally, it was called Fern Grove back in the 1880s or so, and it was mainly a picnic ground where the folks would come up on steamboats and they'd spend a day here in the cool, fresh air, getting away from the heat and the smells of the city. But by 1923, a fellow named David Rose bought the place and made a lot of changes and a lot of improvements. Well, he had a roller coaster and a merry-go-round. He had a dance hall and a cafeteria and a swimming pool. This was the place to be on a summer day. Now, I did all right until the Depression came along in the 1930s, and like most places, it kind of fell on hard times. But it kept going until the Great Flood of 1937 just wiped it out. Now, what you're about to see is not a definitive history of Rose Island. It's reminiscences. It's the memories of folks who were here back in the 1920s and 30s. It's really the memories through the eyes of children because they were also very young back then. So come along and let's see what it was really like here at Rose Island on a summer day.
Rose Island started as a place called Fern Grove, and of course it is not an island. It is, if you call it anything, it's a peninsula. It has 14 Mile Creek on one side and the Ohio River on the other. So it was a church camp primarily in the beginning. And then in 1923, 24, Mr. Rose, who was a very prominent businessman in Louisville, he had many interests, financial interest in Louisville, bought it, leased it, or whatever, probably bought it, and created this amusement park, which he called Rose Island.
It was Ferns Grove when we went, see. And there weren't any public buildings then. They just had picnic tables and the kids picnicked and they'd have, and they played baseball. I think they played Utica team, and I know New Washington and Charlestown played often. Buford was, of course, on the New Washington team at that time.
But we lived back over in there, and there was only one farm between us, and then you could go through that farm and go down what they call Devil's Backbone and go down into Rose Island, so we didn't have far to go. The Devil's Backbone, they called, it was on this farm that was next to us, and it was a big cliff is what it was. But this path ran right along that cliff, and one side was a sheer drop, but on this side going down, well, it was okay, you know, it was, but I guess that's why they call it Devil's Backbone, I don't know. But it run down into the park. And that's why we got to go, because it wasn't far to go and we could just go and come back whenever. And right at the foot of that Devil's Backbone was, we called it the Racing Derby. I don't know what they call them, these big things that they have at Kings Island and all. I don't know, they call them different things. But it was made out of wood. And I can hear it now. It would go clackety-clack, clack, clack, clack when it was going, you know. I only rode it once and I was scared to death. It would go, you know, it'd go up and nothing like what they do now. But it was made out of wood, I remember that. And then you got down into Rose Island. Well, let's see. The first thing you could see on the left after you got down the hill was a golf course. That's what I can remember. And then you went, and then to the left over on the bluff, or round up on the hill, was a big hotel. And I can't remember what the name of it was now, but it was a big hotel there. And then just a little farther was a landing where a boat would come up from Louisville with passengers on. And we would always, those people, we thought it was so funny because when they put that gangplank down, they run off of that boat like, you just wouldn't believe how they'd run off and just like cattle or something. We just thought that was so funny because we'd say, here comes a boat, let's go watch those people get off that boat.
We went ever so often to Ottawa, which is now the Belle of Louisville, but had excursions in the daytime to go to Rose Island in those years. And you'd take your picnic lunch with your family. My mother and us 3 girls used to go up there at that time. And they'd dock, and you'd have to go up this hill to go underneath the arch where it says Rhode Island. They had a picnic area there, and they had amusement park. They didn't have a great big one like Fountain Ferry had in those years, but they had merry-go-round, and they had booths. They had a little pony ride circle set up for the small children, swimming pool. They had a spinning wheel, like a little waterfall someplace up there. I don't recall just when. That's when we went out on the boat. Now, my my father made taking the family up there in the car sometimes in the summer. We'd go up Indiana side, park the car, had to walk across that little swinging bridge. Although I was a young girl, I didn't like that very well. And go in from that side. That's how you got in from Indiana side. And a lot of families would go up there picnicking, and for the little kids, we looked forward to it. And as young children, we loved it. And in those days, the rides and everything were very reasonable. That was back in the 30s. And you're lucky if you got to ride all the rides, but you usually got your limitation. Because those things, in those years, things were not very plentiful either. We had a wonderful time. We loved the boat ride. That was a special trip because they would dock on this side of the river at the foot of Spring Street, where that slope is, where they land the boats when they had the excursions from Indiana side. And we'd load there, and they'd unload us there and go back over to Louisville. And I remember faintly about all the people that would go there. They always had, it was more of a family thing. In those years, it was families, the entertainment, and the kids. They had a swimming pool, the ones that liked to swim. Had a little zoo, a little petting zoo. In those years, they called it the racing derby. They had a small racing derby. They had a Ferris wheel. I like the racing derbies they got today that they have. It was up and down and around, but nothing like the large ones. It had other rides. But in those years, it was a nice amusement park. It was a smaller park than the one on the west end of Fountain Ferry, which was much larger. But it was more of a family thing.
And I made the trip to Rose Island in 1932 at the age of 12 years. The ticket was 50 cents for a round trip. They took us down in the morning, dropped us off, came back and picked us up in the afternoon, took us back to Madison. And while at Rose Island, there was pony rides, wolves in a pen, and of course a big swimming pool, and a pretty good attendance. Lots of people there. They'd come up from Louisville by boat and by automobile, and it was quite a going concern. And the flood of 1937 wiped it out. So it's been idle ever since.
Were you telling me about the monkeys?
Well, there was monkeys there in a cage, and of course they were quite an attraction, but I didn't pay much attention to them. I was more interested in the wolves and the other scenery around.
Well, let's see, I guess I started when I was around 9 years old, and I went until I was about 12. I don't think I went after that. It was Sunday school picnics. And so we would go there and have our picnic lunch with my mother and some other of my Sunday school friends. And then we would all walk around. Then we used to go up on the Devil's Backbone. And Mother wouldn't let me go unless my sister was with me, which she was 13 years older than me. And two of my girlfriends and some of the boys that were in our Sunday school classes, well, we all went up there. And so we were gone quite a while, and my sister found a little snake, and she picked it up on a stick. And she was never afraid of snakes. With my daughters the same way now. But anyway, we heard the boat whistle blow. And Lori, my sister, she said, well, I think we'd better go back down. So we didn't go just then. So the whistle blowed again. So we started down, and it was quite a ways down there. So when we got down, they were pulling the gangplank. It was up off of the ground. And my mother said, my daughter's not on this boat. My two daughters are not on the boat. And then one of the other mothers, she says, my daughter's not here either. So we ran, of course, to the boat. And the plank was up about 4 foot off of the ground. And they wouldn't put it down so we could, walk out. We had to jump up, climb up on it. And that's how we got on the boat. So I didn't get out my mother's side the rest of the way home on the boat.
I remember my mom talking about it being Fern Grove when she was a youngster. But by the time I attended, it was called Rose Island. And we used to always go to Rose Island for the Sunday school picnic and the school picnic out of Jeffersonville. On the eastern end of the park was the roller coaster, which was given the name just like the rock formation in the background there. It was called the Devil's Backbone Ride. And they also had some ponies there that the kids used to like to ride those ponies around the circular track. And of course the swimming pool, that was a favorite place. And the big top was in there for the swimming pool for the swimmers to try to get on and ride around was always a popular thing. In the park, a skating rink, which doubled as a dance hall too. So they would start off as a skating, and then in the evening they would have a dance hall. And they had an organ that played the music for the skaters, and probably was a Wurlitzer organ. And of course, one of the favorites that they played then was the Skater's Waltz. And then they would clean the floor off with these big, wide dust mop, push broom type things after the skaters, and then put dance wax on the floor so they could dance with the band.
And my dad at one time was caretaker at Rose Island, at which we lived there. My sister, my mother and father, we lived in the hotel. We lived in one end of the hotel, and then there was a family that from Kentucky lived in the other end of the hotel. Now my dad was security, but the gentleman in the other end of the hotel, which I don't know their names, he was more of a maintenance man. He done maintenance work on the rides, the merry-go-round. I remember him not an ice maker, but making ice, and he took care of the maintenance of that, and everybody pitched in and helped on the maintenance and stuff like that I can remember. I can remember a lot. In the hotel we had a pretty good dining room. Of course, they'd done a lot of cooking with kerosene then. Didn't have electric or gas, It was a nice dining room, really. And with the cabins, we had people living in them, and they would come in there and eat. Of course, a lot of them had other means for preparing their foods and stuff like that. But as a kid, I can remember a lot of it, really. I played on that swinging bridge constantly. My sister would get on there, and I would go to getting that thing to moving and bouncing and rocking all I could at that small age, and she'd go to screaming, and then Mother would give me heck. Yes, as kids, through the week, it wasn't, there wasn't much there, but the weekends was the busy times, and through the week, we'd run around there and play. Like I said, I rode my first pony there. They put me up on one and held me, and finally I got to where I could sit on it by myself and ride around there. They had they were pretty tamed and everything. But I remember the people. I remember the boat would come in and it would sound the whistle, and under the bed, Mother said I would go under the bed till they quit blowing the whistle. But I really would greet people. My sister and I, we'd run down there and walk back and forth, up and down with people, and we really had a great time as kids.
Well, I was about 6 or 7, and my dad and Mom and my grandma and grandpa went to Rose Island, and we was going to have a picnic. That's what they told me. And we got there. The first time I seen monkeys. They had a big building. It was all screen wire, and it had several monkeys in it, and I was fascinated by them. First time I'd seen them. And Earl Harmony had a boat that had seats all the way around it, and he took us out in the river on the boat. And my dad and me went. My mom didn't go, but we did. He gave me a sucker, and I thought I was top of the world. Because at that time, you know, it was during the Depression. And you didn't get candy like kids do nowadays. And you know, they named it Rose Island, but they had another name for it. There was a lot of ferns growing there, and they called it Fern Grove. But I really enjoyed going, and that was the only time I went.
From Provo, they come in there, and they did luncheons that you could eat, and they had some things for the children to swing on, and they weren't supposed to sell alcohol, but he did. But they did. And that's why they gave him, I guess. And it was just a place to play, and then you could bring children, and they had some swings and some things for the children to do, and you could eat there. They would fix food for you, and it was just a good place to come in the summer, and it's because it was cool down there. It was nice, fresh. And
well, we lived above Rose Island, and my bedroom looked right over the river, and I could see the lights down at Rose Island every night when I went to bed. And we used to go up with the Presbyterian Church in Jeffersonville on the Idlewild for picnics. We would go down there and cross the swimming bridge and go swimming and ride the merry-go-round and all the different rides they had at Rose Island. And we would always walk down and watch the boat come in, too. The boats, I had a good friend, Pearl Smart, that had a cabin up there, and they rode up on the Kentucky side, and they had a boat crossing there so they could spend the weekends. Always liked their swinging bridge. They went over to it, and It was just a fun place to go when we were young. And they had a dance hall, or I remember that, in the middle, where they had usually music.
Were you a little too young for that?
A little bit young, yeah. Yeah, I was a little bit too young for that.
I remember going down there as a kid, like I told you, and my mother would give me a nickel, and I never could decide what I wanted to get, but I always end up getting a grape snow cone. You know, I mean, it was, you know, grape. It was always grape that I got. I always got the same thing. And I remember there listening, you know, going down and sitting on the hill and looking at the boat coming in and all the people getting off, and I'd look at the people swim. I'd never went and swimming there.
Well, I went with my grandmother, and she took me on the old steamer America. And they had a big crowd, and I think it left from the wharf in Louisville. And I don't remember a whole lot, except I remember they had a racing derby. They called it racing derby in those days. A big swimming pool and a dining area with completely screened in.
You say that when you were younger, you went over to Rose Island?
Yes, I went with my church group. We got the, I believe it's called Belle of Louisville, big steamboat, and we, all the church people that wanted to, went to Rose Island and spent the day. We get up there early in the morning, and of course they had all kinds of amusement for the kids and things to do for kids, and had hiking and all kinds of games. We'd take our lunch and spend the day. It was quite a trip for us. But they also had a swimming pool, and we went swimming. And they had a place called Devil's Backbone, and a lot of them would hike up that. But that happened way back in must have been 1931, 1930, somewhere around there.
How many times did you go there?
Oh, we went, the church group went every summer, you know, in like June or July. They'd, not only our church, but other churches would take the boat, you know, rent the boat and go. And I don't think they take trips like that anymore now, only just go up the river and back. But back then it was a real treat to us to get to go.
Can you tell me anything about the boat ride that you remember?
Oh, yes. It was good because the people from the groups that we went with, sometimes it'd be more than one church, and they'd have quartets singing and have good music. And of course it didn't take very long to get from Louisville up to the Rose Island, you know, it just maybe an hour, or maybe more. But
About how old were you at the time, do you remember?
I must have been, I think I was about 15, 16, somewhere around there. I wasn't very old.
You say you went swimming in the swimming pool?
Yeah, they had a swimming pool, and they also, if you didn't have a bathing suit, you could rent one there. They rent you a bathing suit. And of course, all the kids it was hot when we went. It was in the summertime, you know, and the weather was hot, so the kids would play a while and they'd want to cool off, so a lot of them would go swimming.
It must have been the summer of 1936. That would have been the summer before the flood of 37. My dad ran a grocery store, and of course was a 6-day-a-week affair. So the only time we could go any place was when the occasional holiday came along, which included a Monday. So that would have been a Labor Day weekend, or a weekend of 1936. I can't swear that that is exactly when it happened, but the thing was, we were going to go on the Idlewild, which of course is now the Belle of Louisville, to Rose Island. Be honest with you, I remember more about the boat ride than I do about Rose Island, because I've been more interested in boats than I have Rose Island. But I know we left, and I remember that first little bit of movement away from the dock after the lines were cast off to say we are underway. You know, could feel that pulsing of the engines. And as we approached the 2nd Street Bridge, which is called Clark Memorial at that time, I wondered whether we could get under it, because it looked to me like the stacks were going to scrape the bottom of the bridge. They didn't, of course, and never have, and probably never will. And it took a long time to get up to Rose Island, probably an hour and a half to 2 hours, because it is 14 miles up to it. The boat goes about 7 or 8 miles an hour, so it would have taken at least 2 hours to get there. I remember us docking. I remember the unique way that they tied up the boat. They had a line running from a tree on the shore that had 2 loops on it. They took the line from the Belle, or the Idlewild, a single loop, and stuck it between those 2 loops, and then stuck a pipe, an iron pipe, in between, and then used the winch on the Idlewild to tighten it up, and that pulled us into shore. They also put a stern line out. They just connected to a tree. Now, there is a term for that kind of tie-up, but I can't remember what it is, you know. Well, the gangplank was lowered, and we went into Rose Island. My memory of Rose Island was, I think they had a merry-go-round, which I would have been about 11 years old, that they had a merry-go-round. My sister, who also was along, remembers that they had a bear in a cage. I know in the days of the steamboats that took people up there by the thousand, they had their own steamboat for a while called the Rose Island, but then subsequently they used the America, and they used the City of Cincinnati, and there was another one, I can't remember the name of it. And that was the way most people got to Rose Island. They did have a ferry boat from the Kentucky side over to there, which ferried cars. The towers where the lighted arch was. I can only imagine as a steamboat person, or not a boat person, how dark the river is even now as you go up there. And to have been on a boat and have seen that electric lighted sign. This was before rural electrification, so they had to do their own generating. It'd been the only lights in a whole stretch of river. It would have looked like Paris at night from the boat, because there would have been lights throughout the camps. They had cabins you could rent. Of course, the hotel. They had speedboats that would take businessmen quickly back to Louisville while their wife and kids stayed in the cabin during the week. And so they made daily trips back. They had ferry boat running from over across the river to Rose Island from the Rose Island Road, which is still over there. All sorts of things. It was quite an event. Well, it was remote for an amusement park because mainly the amusement parks you had in the city, as we did in Louisville, was at the end of trolley lines. Almost every city with the trolley company put an amusement park at the end of the line so they could have customers on holidays, Saturdays, and Sundays. So just go to any city. Indianapolis had Brockmore or something like that. Louisville had Fontaine Ferry. So before the trolley lines came into being, then people liked to get out of town. And a good way to get out of town here would have been to take the boat to 14 miles up the river, which meant it was an all-day event. You left fairly early in the morning, and it was probably dark or nearly so when you got back. And so people felt like they had an adventure, which they did. So the remoteness of it was an inconvenience in only a mild way. It was a dress-up occasion. People would go there, men would wear coats and ties and wear hats, and the women would wear appropriate attire. such as dresses. You would not see shorts or slacks or things that you would now. Children, too, were dressed up, and it was pretty hard for little boys and girls, too, to go romping around through the trails and the other things and keep that nice, neat appearance that they had when they left home.
Oh, the one thing I want to tell you about is the merry-go-round. We didn't have any money, but the man that ran the merry-go-round was a good friend of my grandpa's and my dad's, and he'd let us ride anytime. If it wasn't full, we could hop on, hop off, and ride anytime we wanted to. He'd say, "Come on, get on." And that was our biggest enjoyment. And then they had things like they have at carnivals, like ring toss, you know, that you toss rings to, and of course we stood and watched that, but of course with no money you didn't get to do anything like that. But we had a good time, and they had, I think they had cabins there that they rented to some people that would come up and stay the weekend. And of course they had the big hotel. That was a big hotel there. It was a pretty place. Oh, and we had the most fun. It was, I mean, it was just a shame that it had to wash away, you know, like it did. We used to have a boat that we went up the river on, and I said to my husband one day, "Let's pull up in there and let's go over on Rose Island, let me look in there." He said, "Well, you're not going to find anything." And I said, "Well, I just want to look." And there wasn't anything. There might be a few concrete things or something, you know, but the 37 flood just took it away, just took it all away, and that was such a shame.
I was a lifeguard up there for 4 years, and I enjoyed it. I had a good time. 1934 probably, 1934, 35, and 30. I was 34, 35, 36, and 37. At the 37 flood, there wasn't much left up there. We would go up in probably the 1st of June, come back about the 1st of September, and we were given a cabin to live in. It was the Rose Island at that time was owned by DBG Rose. Particularly on Sundays when they'd have a tremendous crowd. They would come up on the steamboat called the America. It started off by having a hotel up there. But by the time I was going up there to work, the hotel was in pretty bad shape. The parking lot was on the western side of 14 Mile Creek, and it had a swinging bridge that you had to walk over about 50 feet up in the air. It was very high to get over to Rose Island. Caged animals up there. In one cage was a big black bear, huge black bear, and his name was Teddy Roosevelt. Among other things that they had but they did have alligators every year. That was down in a pit. That pool was built, I believe, in about 1934.
Oh,
1933, 34. And it was the law then. You were supposed to have a lifeguard up there. So they said, "Would you like to be a lifeguard?" Sure, I sure would. $5 a day. Big money. So I became the lifeguard.
How old were you?
I was 16, 17, and 18. It was a dandy pool. It was good for that age. Today it'd be quite small. It was maybe 25 or 30 feet wide, and it went down started about 2 feet, went down to about 4 feet. And my biggest problem was to keep people from from climbing the trees, diving into the pool. And because it was at the shallow end, it might have been 4 feet deep. At the deepest end, it might have been 7 or 8 feet deep. And it would be very easy to hit the bottom. The dining room was on the other end of Rose Island, near the 14 Mile Creek side of it. Their food was delicious. And it was people from Charleston would be coming down quite often for dinners on Sunday and that type of thing. Our cabin, it contained a living room and a kitchen dining room combination, and 2 bedrooms and a bath. The dance hall was there, yeah. Oh yeah, every chance I had, yeah. And then they didn't have an orchestra. They had a Victrola, and it would play every night from after dinner until about 11 o'clock. And the guests would all flock up there. They'd watch and dance and just laugh and have a good time.
We went to Rose Island I don't remember whether it was Saturday or Sunday, but one day we went to Rose Island with my mother and my dad and my sister. She's 2 years younger than I am. And we went up there to Rose Island and had a wonderful time. And there's a little bridge and a place to park your car before you cross that little bridge going into Rose Island. Now this little bridge is about, I'd say roughly 5 or 6 foot wide. Couldn't get a car across it, but it was to walk across it. And that's what everybody did. And I think Dad and I and Mother went up in a boat, just a rowboat. But we got up there and a friend of ours from down in Utica by the name of McCormick had a motorboat. And back then the motorboats wasn't like they are now. They just had a little engine sitting on inside of the boat, and the propeller was onto the shaft, and that come up through the bottom of the boat. And this engine took care of that and made the motorboat out of it. Well, he wanted us to ride with him to go to go to Kentucky, on the Kentucky side, and pick up some people over there that wanted to come to Rose Island. And he did this all the time, every day. And it was fun, I thought, lovely, just out there on the water. Of course, I loved that too. I loved that river.
Every year, when school was out, we took the Idlewild, and it was a school picnic that we went every year on. And it was just something to look forward to. It was wonderful. I mean, go down the end of Spring Street, and get on the boat, and what a treat. And it was a treat too. There was a lot of activity on the boat too, You danced and you ate and you looked around, and it was fun. And it went slow. Loved every minute of it. And then, of course, there was times that we went as a family too, because I lived in Jeffersonville. So we went up the river and went to Rose Island a lot. I do have to tell you about the popsicles. There wasn't such a thing as popsicles, but I can see that it was a kind of a long place with a canopy over it. And mine up here on a counter, they had valves, and they were about that high and about that big around, and they slipped down in little grooves. And I think it was hot ice, because it was not electricity that froze this fruit juice into, they put a stick in it and we ate them. And of course we did not call them popsicles, but I've laughed about that was the beginning of popsicles. And that was what everybody lined up to get most of anything, was those fruit on the stick. And how they froze them, I can see them now. I don't know, probably maybe 12 in a little block, and so that was fun. But just going up the back and climbing up in the back and having a picnic.
And then Rose Island, I think the first remembrance, I know it is, that I have of it is hearing this calliope play. We'd hear the boat blow, and then they'd start to play the calliope, and they would be a little closer to us on the back side of our property than they was when they first blew down at Charlestown Landing. And I just can remember, we could hear the people hollering and laughing from our house if the wind was right. And it
was kind of company for us as kids. And I used to, when I was teenage then, I went with a man that played on the band, in the band on the boat. So I would manage to get on the streetcar and get to Jeff, and we'd get on the boat and I'd ride up, and he'd let some of them out of the band to dance with me all the way up to Rose Island and all the way back.
Was that a steamboat?
It's a paddle wheeler. I guess that's what they call them.
Pretty good size one, huh?
Yeah, that America that used to come up there was a big boat. It burnt on the river down in front of Jeffersonville, I think.
True that there was a walkway with arches that were covered with roses.
There were several archways in the paths that you walked around on. One big archway down where the people got off the boat and they come up through that arch. It was a pretty place, the Roses.
We'd take and go over to Rose Island and we'd go carry the ice cream across the swinging bridge. And then we'd pick a table up and take and have that. And then if we had a few nickels to spend, we'd ride the merry-go-round. And the swimming pool was, always had a crowd. And us kids, we'd take and roam the area till the ice cream all got settled down good. And on the point of where 14 Mile Creek hits Ohio River, that's where the private boats would take and anchor, and they'd come in by the shore. And I remember going down there and talking to the people. And then the hotel was falling down when we was there. And
when was that?
And about 19 and I'd say 32, I imagine. About 32, 33. And
so they weren't using the hotel?
No.
Did you ever meet Mr. Rose?
Yeah, one time. And me and John Wissman sitting on a table, and I heard the one-armed bandits riding. And I told John Wissman, and Mr. Rose was there. I said, I hear the slot machines. And John Wissman gave me a look, and Mr. Rose just laughed and went on. But
they weren't supposed to have them, huh?
I don't think they was, but anyhow, they had a big crowd at Rose Island, and but that was, and I remember my neighbor. Arlie Butoff, and his dad, Ed Butoff, which is earlier, and they had a badge. It said Sheriff of Fern Grove. And I don't know what happened to it, but I'd love to have it. Well, Mr. Rose had one boat of his own, didn't he?
Yeah, they had one called the Rose Island, I think.
Yeah, and I guess he invested a lot of money. Then he had a farm out there joined to Rose Island, which when I went to school, the Whittons lived there, Raymond Whitten.
He lived at the Rose Island farm on Rose Island Road, and it was owned by DBG Rose, that owned Rose Island. And we furnished butter, cream, and eggs to the park dining room during the summer when it is open. It was open in the summer only. And people would come in automobiles and go down across the Swain Bridge, go over to the island and spend the day. Other people would come up from Louisville on the Avalon, and it would dock, I think it was about 10 o'clock in the morning, and they would bring their picnic baskets and spend the Sunday dinner there on the island. And the boat would pull out at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, go back. And I was a barefoot kid, go up there and watch the boat pull away and let everybody wave. And there was a ferry that crossed the river back to Kentucky, they call it the Rose Island Road on the Jefferson County, the Kentucky side. And I never did see the ferry, though, but I was fascinated with the steamboat, which is now the Belle of Louisville. And they had pony rides, and I remember the spring that they would bring an alligator up there, and in the autumn take it back to Louisville someplace. I don't know where they kept it, but it'd be there during the summer. And my dad helped build the steps that led down from the island down to 14 Mile Creek, and he would rent the skiffs, the rowboats, out on Sunday afternoon, and take the money for how long they're gone. It was very little. And he also at times would work the pony ring, and charge them, I think, nickel or dime to ride a pony around the circle. And I remember the dining room they have, and the cabins that they would rent out. And Mrs. Rose would sit back in the back of the dining room and watch people come in and play a one-arm bandit. And they would put a nice little pile of money in there, and she knew exactly when to go up there and put her quarter in and hit the jackpot.
One time, we got an order for 16 chickens, and me and my dad had to do those. My mom was gone to Kentucky, and we had to dress those chickens, and I had to carry them down to the park. I mean, that was a job. We were poor peoples, and we made it. I mean, Rose Island helped, and Mr. and Mrs. Rose were swell people in helping us. You know, one thing that they had down at Rose Island, they had a wonderful swimming pool, and they also had a beautiful dance hall. And it was really pretty to see the people out there, you know, the ladies out there dancing and all. I was 14 when we moved there, so I was big enough to, you know, to really enjoy it. And but as I say, the Roses were wonderful people and helped us out an awful lot. Or not, but it was a beautiful place at one time. And they, before Mr. Rose bought it, they had a big old hotel there, and it was in bad shape. He never did fix that up. But the cottages, a lot of people owned those cottages, like Coots's from Jeffersonville. They owned it. They come up there and stayed the whole summer long, and some of the others did the same thing, the whole summer. See. So it was really a nice place. I hate to think about it, but because it's sad. It would be beautiful again, I'm sure, if it was fixed up. But I don't know. I don't guess they'll ever do that. But this swinging bridge was not really a swinging bridge. It just went up and down. And me and my sister and brother, Gene, and 2 more neighbor kids walked across that thing, and the water was pumping up in there. And I thank my God because we didn't get drowned. You know, it was the next day, I think, that the water came up and washed it out.
We lived on the Rose farm, and I used to have to help them milk the cows and make the butter when we'd take down to Rose Island. And we had a little spring kind of across the road from the house, and you'd have to take the milk and the cream down there to separate it from and make the butter and cool the milk and all. And I had to help them with the hay, pitching the hay, and collecting eggs from the chickens. And like they say, you know, we dressed chickens and took them down there to Rose Island, and we took butter down there. And Mr. and Mrs. Rose always would come over at Christmas time, kind of early before Christmas, and they'd bring us oranges and fruit, you know, to eat for, and that was pretty scarce at that time. And they were lovely people, and they were always kind to us. And I enjoyed going down to Rose Island. My neighbor there, Doris Kemp at that time, the Kemps lived near us, and we used to go down there and watch the people go swimming and so forth and so on. Go back to the kitchen, and that's about it.
Well, I remember them going on the Avalon, and then when we got to the Rose Island, all the men got down on the gangplank and had to run for a picnic table. So we'd have a picnic table, because there weren't too many there, picnic tables.
I remember that our mother fixed a delicious lunch in a basket. We didn't have coolers, and I believe we received a small block of ice on the boat. I think they had ice cut. And when the boat landed, or was anchored, our father jumped off with all the other men, and they ran real fast, as my sister said, get a table. And we were always lucky enough to have one of the nicer tables.
In the shade.
In the shade. And I remember that our brother always wanted to go to the Devil's Backbones, but our mother was afraid for him to, and she wouldn't let him go.
What do you remember?
Well, as she said, our mother was so protective of him and was scared to death to let him jump off of that hill, which I guess he should have because it was so deep, as you say. And I remember our picnic lunch consists of fried chicken and deviled beets and hard-boiled eggs in them. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of that. And our food was always carried in jars because that was before plastic. And we used to take green beans and those beets and the deviled eggs and macaroni salad and chocolate cake. And right, girls? And lemonade. And but we would ride, you know, the pool. I mean, we called it the racing derby, but it was called a roller coaster then. So anyway, and the men would always wear their straw jimmies, as we call them, their straw hats and straw jimmies. And that was before shorts and slacks or anything. And the women would dress up in dresses and that, everything nice. So
We went on 2 picnics every summer. One was our church picnic, and the other was called the Ben Franklin picnic. Our father worked at Federal Printing Company, and they printed tickets for this particular picnic. And he would get all these tickets, of course, tickets to ride the merry-go-round and whatever you needed to have a ticket for. We had plenty of tickets.
Free ice cream.
Free ice cream.
Oh, you had to have a ticket though. Free
Yeah, you
ice
had to
cream.
have a ticket. And
To ride the ponies, you'd have a
and to
ticket.
ride the ponies.
And I remember that I used to go back every time to get ice cream, and the man said, "You've been here several times, you need a new ticket." Because I'd used the same ticket.
And then they had dancing, not on the church picnic, but on the Ben Franklin, they had dancing on the boat. And they had a pavilion for dancing at the Ben Franklin, and they had live music. And everybody would dance, and the adults had a lot of fun dancing.
Everybody dressed up to go to the picnics in white. They're good clothes.
Yeah.
They didn't go in just casual clothes.
See what else?
Oh, and then when we'd go under the bridges on the boat, they'd always, first they played the calliope.
Yeah.
When we were
Yeah.
getting on the boat, they played the
Yeah.
calliope. They'd blow their, well, that wouldn't be a horn. What is it on a boat? Whistle.
Whistle.
Yeah.
But it was a
Loud.
loud, deep kind of a whistle.
And when we get almost there to Rose Island, they would blow that whistle.
Uh-huh. We knew we were close.
Yeah. Of course, as children or kids, you could hardly wait to get off.
It was a beautiful place at one time.
And as young children, we loved it.
Everybody liked it, and everybody had a good time.
We run and played. We had the best time.
It was just a fun place to go when we were young.
Good place to go and have a lot of fun.
Really had a great time as kids.
It was the nicest park around in its day.
Well, there's not much left that was made by the hand of man. It's mostly gone back to nature. But that's as it should be, I guess, because this was their history, their memories. It was also a part of American history, a part that's gone, and it'll never come back. But I hope by listening to these folks, we've all got a better understanding of what it was like a long time ago here at Rose Island on a summer day.
Those were the days. I wish I could relive them 100 times.